They say justice is blind, but sometimes it's just bought. This isn't just a story. It's a piece of my life, a wound that never truly healed until I decided to cut out myself. The day I learned Judge Theron Blackwell had sold my case, every memory of that courtroom, every gut-wrenching moment of defeat, twisted into something far more insidious. It wasn't incompetence or a bad argument. It was a deliberate, calculated betrayal, a gavel swung not by law, but by greed. That revelation didn't just break me. It forged me anew into a weapon I never knew I could be. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My name is Kalen Vance, and for 68 years, I thought I knew the meaning of honest work, of community, of legacy. Oak Haven, Tennessee, was more than just a dot on a map. It was the blood in my veins, the timber of my family tree. For 3 generations, the Vance family had built boats on the banks of the Cumberland River, custom vessels that were more than just transport. They were works of art, each plank, each rivet, a testament to craftsmanship and pride. Riverbend Boats wasn't just a business. It was Oak Haven's heartbeat, the steady rhythm of hammers, the sweet scent of cedar and varnish mingling with the river air. I was born into that scent, into the quiet hum of the workshop. My grandfather taught me to feel the grain of the wood, to listen to the engine's song, to respect the river that gave us life. My father showed me how to run the books, how to treat every customer like family. By the time I took the helm, Riverbend Boats was a local institution, a place where people knew they'd get a fair deal and a boat that would last a lifetime. My hands, now gnarled with age and memory, once shaped hulls that danced on the water, vessels that carried families to fishing spots and lovers on sunset cruises. Those were good years. Simple, honest, fulfilling. Then came Sterling Voss. He arrived like a slick, well-oiled predator from Nashville, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition, with a glint in his eye that saw only dollar signs where I saw generations of sweat and soul. He was a developer, a titan of luxury resorts and sprawling golf courses, and he had his sights set on Oak Haven's pristine riverfront. My property, Riverbend Boats, sat on the most coveted stretch of land, prime real estate for his grand vision of the Cumberland Riviera. He started subtly at first, through intermediaries, offers disguised as opportunities. Mr. Vance, we like to offer you a generous sum for your property. Think of retirement, a comfortable life. I chuckled, polite but firm. Son, this is my retirement. And my life. This land is business. It's not for sale. Voss didn't understand, no. He upped the ante, the numbers growing absurd, enough to buy a small island. But money wasn't the currency of my life. Legacy was. My father's ghost walked those workshops. My grandfather's tools still hung on the walls. Selling would be a betrayal of everything I believed in, everything that made me a Vance. I refused again and again, with increasing exasperation. That's when the smile left Voss's face, replaced by a hard, cold resolve. You'll regret this, Kalen, he'd hissed during our last private meeting, his voice like sandpaper. I always get what I want. And so the lawsuit began. Not a direct eminent domain claim, which would have been politically messy for Voss, but something far more insidious, a complex, obscure land dispute. His legal team, a phalanx of sharp-suited sharks, dug up an ancient, barely legible deed from the county archives, claiming an almost forgotten easement, a right-of-way that, if enforced, would effectively cut off Riverbend Boats' direct access to the Cumberland. It was a technicality, a legal maneuver designed to choke my business, to make my land useless to me, forcing my hand. They weren't trying to buy me out anymore. They were trying to steal it. I was 64 then, and the fight aged me a decade in months. My life savings, painstakingly accumulated over a lifetime of honest work, began to drain away into legal fees. I mortgaged my home, sold off some of my personal collection of antique tools. Anything to keep the fight going. I believed in the system. I believed in justice. Oak Haven was a small town, but it was part of a bigger country, a country built on laws and fairness. My lawyer, Ilera Finch, was a firecracker, young, fresh out of law school, but sharp as a tack and fiercely dedicated. She saw the injustice, the predatory nature of Voss's actions. "Mr. Vance," she'd assured me, her eyes bright with conviction, "their claim is flimsy at best. The precedents are on our side. The historical usage, the very nature of your business. We have a strong case." Her optimism was infectious, a much-needed balm for my frayed nerves. I trusted her implicitly. The trial itself felt endless, a Kafkaesque nightmare unfolding in the stately, brick-faced Oakhaven County Courthouse. Each day, I'd sit in the stiff wooden chairs, listening to legal jargon swirl around me, feeling like a stranger in my own life story. On the bench sat Judge Theron Blackwell. He was a pillar of the community, a man with a reputation for impartiality, a stern but seemingly fair demeanor. He had a shock of silver hair, a voice like gravel, and eyes that missed nothing. At least, that's what everyone said. I watched him closely, searching for any sign of bias, but he maintained a stoic, unreadable expression. He was a law personified. Elara was brilliant. She meticulously presented our evidence. Ancient maps, witness testimonies from lifelong Oakhaven residents attesting to Riverbend Boat's uninterrupted river access, expert opinions on the practical impossibility of Voss's proposed easement. We had photographs, historical documents, even old newspaper clippings detailing my family's history on that very riverbank. It felt like we were winning. There were moments when Voss's lawyers looked visibly frustrated, their carefully constructed arguments crumbling under Elara's precise cross-examinations. I dared to hope, I dared to believe that justice would prevail, that my legacy would be saved. But then subtle shifts began. Objections that Elara raised, often valid, were overruled with a curt wave of Judge Blackwell's hand. Objections from Voss's side, sometimes specious, were sustained. Key pieces of our historical evidence were deemed hearsay or irrelevant in moments that felt arbitrary. His interpretations of the law started to feel peculiar, twisted. Elara would exchange worried glances with me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "He's leaning, Mr. Vance," she whispered to me one afternoon, her voice tight with concern. I don't understand why. The air in the courtroom grew heavy, oppressive. The certainty I felt began to erode, replaced by a cold dread. Even though our arguments were sound, even though the historical facts were undeniable, it felt like the ground beneath us was tilting. The verdict came on a dreary Tuesday morning. Judge Blackwell, without a trace of emotion, read his decision. He sided with Sterling Voss. He upheld the ancient easement, ruling that Riverbend Boats would lose its direct access to the Cumberland River. He awarded Voss significant damages for interruption of property rights. My world didn't just crumble, it detonated. The land, the business, my legacy, all of it ripped away in a few monotone sentences. My home, already mortgaged, would follow. I was bankrupt, broken, 64 and utterly destitute. The years that followed were a blur of bitterness and despair. Oakhaven, once my haven, felt like a prison of mocking memories. I watched as Voss's bulldozers tore through the Riverbend Boats workshop, flattening generations of my family's history to make way for the foundation of his gaudy resort. The scent of cedar and varnish was replaced by the stench of diesel and destruction. My home was foreclosed, my truck repossessed. I became an old man adrift, a ghost in my own town. To survive, I took on menial jobs, anything to put food on the table and keep a roof over my head in a rented room on the outskirts of town. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife. For a time, I became a night watchman at the very place where I lost everything, the Oakhaven County Courthouse. Each night, I'd walk the silent, echoing corridors, the polished floors reflecting the dim emergency lights, the weight of my loss a constant companion. I'd pass Judge Blackwell's chambers, now locked, imagining him ensconced in his comfortable life, while mine lay in ruins. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me, a persistent, venomous whisper in the back of my mind. The verdict still made no sense. It violated common sense, legal precedent, and every fiber of my being. Elara, devastated by the loss, had tried for an appeal, but was swiftly denied, again by Judge Blackwell, citing lack of new evidence. It was a closed door, a final nail in the coffin of my hopes. I was a broken man, but the mind, even an old one, refuses to be fully silenced. The injustice, the sheer logic of the ruling, kept replaying in my head. There had to be something. Something I missed. Something wrong. One particularly cold, late night. I was on my rounds, emptying trash bins, a task far removed from shaping wood or navigating a river. I was in the administrative wing, near the clerk's office, where Blackwell often worked late. The office was empty, but a light was on in the judge's private, adjoining study. I didn't think much of it. He was known to burn the midnight oil. But as I approached the wastebin near his desk, my eyes caught on a small, crumpled piece of paper, half hidden beneath a used coffee cup and some discarded legal briefs. It was an appointment reminder, but it was the handwritten note scribbled on the back that snagged my attention. It was a date, circled emphatically, March 12 th. That date jumped out at me because it was the day before Judge Blackwell delivered his final, devastating ruling in my case. Below the date, a series of seemingly random letters and numbers. CH 877 RV ACQ. And then, scrawled hastily, a name that made the blood run cold in my veins. Corvin Hayes. Corvin Hayes. The name triggered a faint, unpleasant memory. He wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a public face of Sterling Voss's operation. He was an enigma, a shadowy figure I'd seen around Voss once or twice during trial, always in the background, always silent, a man who blended into periphery. He was a fixer, I'd heard whispered, a troubleshooter. My hands, usually steady, trembled as I smoothed out the crumpled paper. CH 877 Riv ACQ. My mind raced. Take Corvin Hayes? 877, a monetary figure? RIVCQ, riverfront acquisition? The pieces, once scattered and meaningless, began to click into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just an appointment. It was a coded message, a record of a meeting, a transaction. A transaction that happened the day before my life was stolen. The initial disbelief was a tidal wave, then a cold, white-hot fury that surged through my veins, chasing away the years of despair. This wasn't just a bad verdict. It was a corrupt one. Judge Theron Blackwell hadn't just made a mistake. He had deliberately, knowingly sold my case. His gavel swung by the unseen hand of Sterling Voss and his enforcer, Corvin Hayes. The odd rulings, a dismissive tone, the swift denial of appeal, it all coalesced into a horrifying, undeniable truth. I had been robbed. Deliberately. My old man's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a renewed, ferocious purpose. The vulnerability, the endless, grinding despair, burned away in an instant, replaced by a steely resolve. I had nothing left to lose. My home was gone, my business destroyed, my name tarnished. But I still had my life, and now I had a target. I was 68, and a dormant fire had just been ignited within me. I secreted the crumpled note into my pocket. It wasn't enough to expose a powerful judge, not yet. But it was a thread, a starting point, a whisper of truth in a world of lies. I looked out through the courthouse window, at the pre-dawn gloom that clung to Oakhaven. I didn't know how I was going to do it, how I was going to unravel the web of corruption, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that Judge Theron Blackwell was going to pay. And my first step, made under the cover of that fading darkness, was simple. I was going to follow Corvin Hayes, the man whose initials I now recognize on that crumpled piece of paper. The crumpled note, a forgotten scrap of paper beneath a coffee cup, became my compass, pointing a trembling finger toward the truth. Corvin Hayes. The name, once a vague echo, now vibrated with malignant significance. March 12th, the day before Blackwell's verdict. CH 877 Riv ACQ. It was a code, but a code I knew, deep in my bones, referred to Riverbend boats, to the acquisition that had stolen my life. I tucked the paper into my shirt pocket, feeling its rough edge against my skin like a brand. The courthouse, usually a mausoleum of quiet despair for me, now felt like a viper's nest, and I, the old night watchman, was merely a mouse who had stumbled upon a very large, very venomous snake. The pre-dawn gloom outside Oakhaven's windows wasn't just a coming day. It was the dawn of a new purpose, dark and unforgiving. For years, I had walked those polished halls, a ghost among the living, my footsteps echoing the emptiness inside me. Now, Each creak of my worn shoes was a deliberate step, a silent vow. My 68 years, once a burden of loss, now felt like a reservoir of patience, a lifetime of observation honed into a weapon. I was old, yes, but I was also invisible. Who pays attention to the old man emptying trash cans, mopping floors? Nobody. And that, I realized, was my greatest advantage. My first task was to understand Corvin Hayes. He was no lawyer. Ilera would have flagged him. He wasn't a PR man. Voss had plenty of those. He was the shadow, the fixer. Fixers don't have public offices. They don't advertise. They exist in the periphery. I started my surveillance, not with high-tech gadgets, but with the oldest tools known to man, my eyes, my ears, and my stubborn will. My night watchman shifts gave me invaluable access. I began to pay closer attention to the comings and goings, not just of Blackwell, but of anyone who seemed to move with a certain guarded urgency. I noted license plates in the staff parking lot, observed patterns. Blackwell, I knew, often arrived early. Sometimes a sleek, black sedan, tinted windows opaque as sunglasses, would pull up to the side entrance, far from the public eye. A man, always in a dark suit, would slip out, a brief, hushed exchange of Blackwell, then disappear. Before, I dismiss it as judicial business, confidential meetings. Now, every detail was a potential clue. It took weeks of patient watching, of feigning indifference as I swept floors near the judge's chambers, of lingering in the parking lot during my lunch breaks, pretending to enjoy a sandwich while my gaze scoured every vehicle. My old sedan, a beat-up 98 Grand Marquis I'd managed to keep, became my mobile hideout. It had seen better days, its paint faded, its suspension protesting every bump, but it was inconspicuous, a part of the background. I parked it blocks away from the courthouse during the day, walking the rest of the way, just another Oak Haven local running errands. One Tuesday morning, around 7 a.m., as the courthouse was just beginning to stir, the black sedan reappeared. This time, as a man stepped out, a sliver of sunlight caught his profile. Sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to miss nothing, a predatory stillness about him. This was Corvin Hayes. He carried no briefcase, just a slim, leather portfolio. He nodded once to Blackwell, who met him at the side door, a quick, almost imperceptible handshake, and then they were inside. My heart hammered a rhythm against my ribs. This was it. This was the man from the note. I couldn't follow them inside without raising suspicion. So I waited. I watched the black sedan. It stayed parked. An hour later, Hayes emerged alone, his face impassive. He slid into the sedan and drove off, turning right toward the highway that led out of Oak Haven. I didn't hesitate. My shift was technically over. I hustled to my own car, my old Grand Marquis groaning to life. I kept a safe distance, letting other cars come between us. Hayes drove with precision, not fast, but steadily, like a man who knew exactly where he was going and didn't expect to be followed. He led me out of Oak Haven, onto Interstate 40, heading west. Nashville, of course. Voss's empire was based in Nashville. The drive was long, over an hour. My car, usually reserved for trips to the grocery store or the doctor, felt like a high-stakes getaway vehicle. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my old eyes straining to keep Hayes' black sedan in sight without being noticed. He pulled into a sprawling, upscale office complex in the Gulch district of Nashville, a gleaming monument to modern commerce. He parked in an underground garage. I found a spot on the street, near the entrance, pretending to be engrossed in a newspaper I hadn't read in years. I watched for an hour, 2 hours. He didn't come out. This wasn't a quick meeting. This was a work day. I realized Hayes wasn't just a visitor. He worked here. This was his lair. The building was called the Apex Tower, a name that seemed to mock my humble origins. I spent the next few days repeating this routine, using sick days, calling in favors to get my shifts covered. I couldn't afford to lose my job, but I couldn't afford not to do this. I observed Hayes' routine. He was meticulous, punctual. He arrived at the same time, left at the same time. He ate lunch alone, usually a prepackaged meal brought from home. He rarely interacted with others in the complex, maintaining a professional distance that bordered on aloofness. He was a man of quiet efficiency, a ghost in plain sight. I needed to know more about what happened inside that building. I couldn't just walk in. I was an old man in worn clothes. I'd stick out like a sore thumb, but I had an idea. The building had a bustling coffee shop on the ground floor, a place where business meetings bled into casual conversations. I could blend in there. The next day, I dressed in the least shabby clothes I owned, a clean plaid shirt and a pair of pressed khakis. I bought the cheapest coffee they had and settled into a corner booth, pretending to read the free newspaper, my senses on high alert. It was a world away from Oakhaven, a whirlwind of sharp suits, designer perfumes, and the clatter of keyboards. I listened. I learned snippets of corporate gossip, heard names, observed interactions. And then I heard it. Corvin Hayes is a miracle worker, a young woman in a tailored skirt suit said to her colleague, oblivious to the old man nursing a lukewarm coffee nearby. Another smooth acquisition this week. Voss is practically calling him his golden boy. Yeah, her colleague replied, but I heard the last one was messy. Small town, old-timers, you know? Hayes had to really lean on the local judge. My breath caught in my throat. Asterisk small town. Old-timers. Local judge. Asterisk it was Oakhaven. It had to be. My hands, resting on the newspaper, clenched into fists. They were talking about me, about Blackwell, about the theft of Riverbend boats. A cold, hard fury settled in my chest. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was an open wound, oozing truth. These people, sitting here sipping their lattes, talked about ruining lives as casually as they discussed the weather. Voss, Hayes, Blackwell. They were part of systemic rot. I kept coming back to the coffee shop, a silent observer in their gilded cage. I learned more about Voss's enterprise, Voss Holdings. They specialized in strategic land acquisition, which was a polite way of saying they carved up small towns for luxury developments. Corvin Hayes was the architect of these acquisitions, the man who smoothed over unforeseen obstacles, like stubborn old men who wouldn't sell. My observations of Hayes sharpened. I noticed he occasionally received small, unmarked envelopes from a courier service. He'd open them discreetly, glance at the contents, then tuck them into his portfolio. Once, I saw him make call, his voice low and urgent. The Oakhaven parcel is secured. Transfer complete. Make sure Judge Blackwell's consulting fee is processed by end of day. My blood ran cold. Consulting fee, the euphemism for a bribe. It was all there laid bare. The audacity, the casual cruelty of it, made my stomach churn. I realized then that this wasn't just about Riverbend boats. It was about a pattern, a systemic corruption that had likely destroyed other lives, other legacies. Voss wasn't just buying land. He was buying justice, one judge at a time. And Corvin Hayes was his chief broker. My resolve hardened, cementing itself into an unyielding block of ice. The vulnerable, despairing Kalen Vance was gone, replaced by a man fueled by a singular, burning purpose. I was no longer seeking answers. I was seeking retribution. And to get it, I needed more than just overheard whispers. I needed proof, undeniable and irrefutable, that would bring down not just Blackwell, but the entire operation. I knew Blackwell wouldn't keep anything incriminating in his courthouse chambers. He was too careful. He'd have a safe place, a private place where he felt secure, a home office, perhaps. My investigation shifted. Back in Oakhaven, I began to watch Judge Blackwell's home, a stately Georgian on the affluent side of town, nestled behind a meticulously manicured hedge. I drove by slowly, late at night, under the cover of darkness. I noted security cameras, alarm systems, all the trappings of a man with something to hide. I remembered something Alara Finch had once mentioned back when we were still fighting. She'd talked about Blackwell's love for antique maps, how his study was filled with them. He was a collector, a man who appreciated hidden details, forgotten histories. Perhaps he would hide his own dirty secrets within his collection. One evening, as I was driving past his home, I noticed a subtle detail. A small, older model pickup truck, the kind a handyman might drive, was parked in Blackwell's driveway. It was late, almost 10 p.m. As I watched, a man, clearly not Blackwell, emerged from the house, carrying a toolbox. He locked the front door, checked it twice, and drove off. A handyman working late, or something else. I remembered Blackwell was a widower, living alone. He had no one to watch his home if he was away. I pulled into a darkened spot down the street, killed my engine, and waited. An hour later, Blackwell's own luxury sedan, a dark Lexus, pulled into the driveway. He looked tired, worn. He went inside. The next morning, I saw the handyman's truck again, pulling out of Blackwell's driveway. This time, the driver was talking on his phone, oblivious. I got a clearer look at him. He was a local, a man named Tavis, who sometimes did odd jobs around town. I'd seen him at the hardware store. That night, during my shift at the courthouse, I made a detour to the administrative offices. I needed to know Blackwell's schedule when he might be out of town. It wasn't hard to find. A quick glance at the judge's public docket, then a look at his vacation requests on the internal calendar. It was almost too easy. Judge Blackwell was scheduled to attend a judicial conference in Atlanta for 3 days, starting the following Monday. He would be gone, and his handyman, Tavis, would likely be checking on the house. A dangerous idea sparked in my mind, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. This was my chance. My one desperate chance to find the proof I needed, the smoking gun that would expose Blackwell, Voss, and Hayes for the criminals they were. But it would mean breaking the law, crossing a line I had never imagined crossing. I thought of riverbend boats, reduced to rubble. I thought of my family's legacy, bought and sold for a consulting fee. I thought of Alara, her bright optimism crushed, her faith in justice shaken. And I knew with absolute certainty that I had nothing left to lose. The following Monday, as the first tendrils of dawn stretched across the Oakhaven sky, I watched Blackwell's Lexus disappear down the street, heading for the highway to Atlanta. My heart was a drum in my chest, a frantic beat of fear and exhilaration. I was going to break into Judge Theron Blackwell's home. I knew Tavis, the handyman, would likely come by in the afternoon to check on things. I had to get in and out before he arrived. This gave me a window of just a few hours. I went home, changed into dark, inconspicuous clothes, and gathered what little I thought I might need. A small flashlight, a pair of worn leather gloves, a few basic tools from my boat-building days that might serve another purpose now. I looked at my reflection in the dim light of my rented room. The old man staring back was gaunt, his eyes etched with years of sorrow. But now, a flicker of something new burned there, a cold, hard fire. I drove my old Grand Marquis not to Blackwell's house, but to a quiet, wooded area a mile or so away. I parked it deep in the trees, hidden from the road, and began to walk. The crisp morning air did little to calm my nerves. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sounded like a warning. When I reached Blackwell Street, I kept to the shadows, moving with the practiced stealth of a hunter, or perhaps a ghost. The house stood silent, imposing. No lights, no movement. A fortress of stolen power. I approached the back of the house, where the hedges were thicker, hoping for a less visible entry point. The windows were locked as expected. The back door was solid, with a deadbolt. I ran my gloved fingers along the frame, searching, assessing. My gaze fell on a small, recessed window leading to what looked like a utility room or pantry. It was old, a single pane, not reinforced. It was my only hope. With a small, flat pry bar, a tool I'd once used to separate boat planks, I carefully worked at the frame, listening intently for any sound, any sign of movement. The wood was old, a little soft. A faint creak, then a groan. I applied more pressure, my muscles straining. The window gave way with a soft crack, the latch popping free. I pushed it open just enough to slide through, scraping my shoulder, but ignoring the pain. I was inside. The utility room smelled faintly of bleach and stale air. I moved silently through the house, each step agonizingly slow. The polished floors, the expensive furniture, the hushed grandeur. It was everything I'd lost, embodied in this man's ill-gotten gains. I found Blackwell's study. It was exactly as Alara had described. Lined with bookshelves, displaying antique maps, globes, and leather-bound tomes. A heavy oak desk dominated the center of the room. This was where the secrets would be. I started with the desk, gently opening drawers, searching for anything out of place. Nothing. Just standard office supplies, legal papers, a personal journal. I moved to the bookshelves, scanning for a hidden compartment, a loose panel. My eyes darted across the maps, the intricate lines and faded colors, searching for a clue. Then I noticed it. Not on the desk, not on a shelf, but tucked away, almost hidden, behind a heavy frame map of the Cumberland River from the 1800s. A small, nondescript safe, built into the wall. My heart leaped. This was it. This was where he kept his true treasures, his darkest secrets. But how to open it? I wasn't a safecracker. I didn't have the tools or the time. I tried twisting the dial, feeling for any resistance, any hint of a combination. Nothing. Desperation began to claw at me. Tavis would be here soon. I had to find something. My eyes scanned the room wildly, searching for anything, a key, a note, a hidden code. Then, on the corner of Blackwell's desk, half covered by an open law book, I saw a small, silver-framed photograph. It was of a younger Blackwell, smiling, standing beside a woman I assumed was his late wife. And behind them, in the background, almost an afterthought, was an old wooden fishing boat, its name clearly visible on the stern. The Elara. My breath hitched. Elara, my lawyer's name. A chilling wave of realization washed over me. Blackwell's wife was named Elara, the same name as my young, idealistic lawyer. Was it coincidence? Or was this a deliberate, cruel twist of the knife? My gaze snapped back to the safe, then to the photograph. Elara, a name, a memory, a date? My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The safe, the name, the fishing boat. And then, just as I heard the faint, distant rumble of a vehicle approaching the street outside, a cold dread tightening its grip around my throat, I noticed a tiny, almost invisible engraving on the silver frame of the photograph. A series of numbers. A date. It was small, discreet, likely a wedding anniversary, or perhaps the birthday of his deceased wife. It was a combination. And the sound of Tavis's truck was growing louder, closer. I had seconds. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, reached for the safe dial. This was my one chance. The faint rumble grew louder, closer. Tavis's pickup. I could almost hear the gravel crunch under his tires. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. The Elara. The name, the date. It had to be. My fingers, surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, fumbled with the dial, inputting the numbers from the silver frame. Each click of the tumblers was deafening in the sudden, profound silence of the study. 1 number, 2, a faint, metallic whisper. 3, the truck was definitely on the street now, slowing. 4, a soft thunk from within the safe's mechanism. I pulled the small handle. It clicked, then gave. The heavy door swung open, revealing a dark recess. My eyes darted to the window. The truck engine cut out. I had seconds. Inside the safe, nestled on a dark velvet lining, were 3 items. A small, red leather-bound ledger, its spine worn, a thick, sealed manila envelope, and a sleek, black USB drive, marked only with a stylized, almost Celtic-looking symbol. I didn't hesitate. I snatched all 3, shoving them into the inner pocket of my jacket. I heard the distinct sound of Tavis's boots on the flagstone path, leading to the front door. He wasn't just checking the outside. He was coming in. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I slammed the safe door shut, twisting the handle until it clicked. It wouldn't lock, but it would look closed. I glanced around the study. No time to put the photograph back exactly. I just pushed it roughly into its spot. Tavis's key scraped in the lock. I moved, not thinking, just reacting. The utility room. The window. I slid under the heavy oak desk, pressing myself against the back wall, barely daring to breathe. The scent of old paper and Blackwell's expensive aftershave filled my nostrils. My pulse roared in my ears. The front door opened. I heard Tavis call out, a casual, "Judge?" Anyone home? The heavy thud of the door closing. Footsteps. Slow, methodical. He was checking the house. Each creak of the floorboards was a dagger to my nerves. I could hear him in the living room, then the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, then closed it. He was thorough, too thorough. He was coming this way. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to become invisible, a part of the shadows. The footsteps paused just outside the study door. My entire body tensed. A moment stretched into an eternity. Then, a sigh. Tavis moved past, heading deeper into the house, presumably toward the bedrooms. Perhaps he was checking the alarm system or the heating. This was my chance. I crawled out from under the desk, moving with an urgency that belied my age. I slipped out of the study, through the kitchen, into the utility room. The window I pried open was still ajar. I pushed it wider, then carefully slid back outside, scraping my hip, but feeling no pain, only the electric hum of escape. I didn't stop to close the window. Tavis would find it, but by then I'd be long gone. I kept to the shadows, moving quickly, silently, through the thick hedges and across the manicured lawns of Blackwell's neighbors, until I reached the wooded path where I'd hidden my car. The Grand Marquis started with a familiar, weary cough. I drove, not back to my rented room, but to a deserted overlook high above the Cumberland River, a place I used to take my father when he was too old to walk the riverbanks himself. It was a place of quiet reflection, now a place of urgent revelation. The morning sun, usually a source of comfort, felt like an interrogation lamp as I pulled out the ledger, the envelope, and the USB drive. My hand still trembled slightly. The ledger first. I opened it to a random page. Neat, precise handwriting. Dates, amounts, and a column of initials. B.T, J.R, M.L, below them, coded project names. Oakhaven Riverfront Acquisition, followed by BT and a substantial sum. Another entry, Nashville Gulch Expansion, followed by JR and an even larger sum. It was a meticulous record of corruption, a chilling roadmap of Voss's empire, built on purchase justice. Blackwell wasn't the only one. He was just a cog in a much larger, more insidious machine. Next, the manila envelope. Inside, a cashier's check made out to Cumberland Holdings, LLC, a name I didn't recognize, but the amount made my stomach clench. $777,000. And in the memo line, scrawled in Corvin Hayes' unmistakable hand, consulting fee, Oakhaven River Bend. $777,000. The 877 from Hayes' note. My initial guess was off by $100,000. A consulting fee for selling my life, my legacy, my home. The cold, hard rage I had felt earlier now burned with a steady, unquenchable intensity. This wasn't just my story anymore. This was a pattern, a systemic rot eating away at the very foundations of justice. Voss wasn't just a developer. He was a kingpin, and Hayes his enforcer. And Blackwell, my supposed impartial judge, was nothing more than a well-paid pawn. The USB drive. This was the wild card. I knew I couldn't open it. My old flip phone was my only piece of technology, and it certainly wasn't equipped for encrypted files. I needed Alara. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over her number. After the trial, after the appeal was denied, Alara had left Oakhaven. She said she couldn't practice law in a town where justice was bought and sold. She'd moved to Knoxville, working for a small nonprofit, fighting for environmental causes. She'd been devastated by our loss. Her faith in the system shattered. Would she even believe me? Would she risk everything again? I had to try. She was the only one. I called her. It rang twice, then her voice cautious, professional. Alara Finch. Alara, it's Kaylin Vance. My voice was rough, strained, a beat of silence. Mr. Vance? Is everything all right? I haven't heard from you in years. Her voice was soft, but I could hear the underlying concern. No, Alara, nothing is all right. But I think I found something. Something big. About Blackwell. About Voss. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Mr. Vance, what are you talking about? The case is over. There's nothing more we can do. There is. I found proof, undeniable proof. Blackwell took a bribe, 4 Riverbend boats. And it's not just him. It's bigger than that. Much bigger. I could almost see her, sitting in her small office in Knoxville, her brow furrowed in skepticism. Proof? Mr. Vance, I understand you're upset, but the court ruled. We tried to appeal. I know. But this isn't speculation, Elara. I have a ledger, a check, and a digital file. I broke into Blackwell's home last night and took it from his safe. I know it sounds crazy, but you know me. I wouldn't lie about this. Another long silence. Then her voice, laced with a mix of disbelief and something else, something I recognized as a flicker of her old fire. You broke into Judge Blackwell's house? Kaylin, that's breaking and entering. You could go to jail. I know the risks. I have nothing left to lose. But if I'm right, if this is what I think it is, then Voss didn't just steal my land. He stole justice from an entire community. From who knows how many communities. I heard a chair scrape in the background. Okay, Kaylin. Okay. Tell me more. What exactly did you find? I described the ledger entries, the cashier's check, the coded initials. I told her about Corvin Hayes, the consulting fee. I could hear the shift in her tone, the skepticism giving way to a dawning, horrified understanding. A ledger? A $700,000 check? She whispered, the fire growing stronger in her voice. My God, Kaylin, if this is real, it's real, Elara. And I have this USB drive. I think it's the key, but I can't open it. I need your help. There was a moment of profound silence, a heavy pause with the weight of my request. The enormity of what I was asking her to risk hung in the air between us. Then she exhaled slowly. All right, Kaylin, don't do anything else. Don't talk to anyone. Come to Knoxville. Meet me tomorrow. I'll clear my schedule. My office, 9 a.m. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. Thank you, Elara. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said, her voice grim. If what you say is true, we're walking into a firestorm. I drove back to my rented room, the ledger and documents secured, the USB drive nestled against my chest. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind raced, replaying every detail, every risk. I was no longer the broken old man. I was a man on a mission, fueled by righteous anger and a desperate hope for justice. The next morning, I was in Knoxville by 8:30 a.m., my old Grand Marquis blending into the city traffic like a forgotten memory. Elara's office was in an unassuming brick building downtown. She was waiting for me, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. She looked older than I remembered, the youthful fire of her law school days tempered by the harsh realities of the world, but it was still there, flickering beneath the surface. Mr. Vance, she said, ushered me into her small, cluttered office. Let's see what you have. I laid out the ledger, the check, and the USB drive on her desk. She picked up the ledger first, her fingers tracing the entries. Her eyes widened with each page. This is meticulous, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Dates, amounts, initials. My God, Kaylin, this isn't just one judge. This is a network. She examined the check, her jaw tightening. Cumberland Holdings, LLC. I'll run a search on that. But $700,000 for a consulting fee. This is damning. Then she picked up the USB drive. She had a small, older laptop, not connected to the office network, which she used for sensitive client files. She plugged in the drive. A dialog box popped up, and her password. Encrypted, she said, biting her lip. Of course. Voss wouldn't leave something like this unprotected. My heart sank. Any ideas? Usually it's something personal. A birthday and anniversary. A pet's name, something only the owner would know. Blackwell, his deceased wife, Elara, the fishing boat, the Elara, the date on the photo frame, the combination for the safe. Was it too obvious? Try the date from his wife's photo. I suggested. The one on the silver frame. It was a safe combination. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Good thinking. She typed in the date. Incorrect password. My shoulders slumped. My one good idea. Wait, Ilera said, her eyes narrowing. Sometimes they use a different format, or a specific phrase. What about the boat name? The Ilera, I supplied. She typed it in. The Ilera. The screen flickered. A new folder appeared. Access granted. A collective gasp escaped both our lips. Inside the folder were dozens of files. PDFs, spreadsheets, audio recordings, encrypted emails. File names like Project Cumberland Riviera, Phase 1, Judge B, payout schedule, Hayes report, obstacle mitigation. Ilera started clicking, her fingers flying across the trackpad. We saw detailed financial transactions, offshore accounts, shell companies, all linked to Voss Holdings. Spreadsheets showing payouts to multiple judges, not just Blackwell, across Tennessee and even into neighboring states like Kentucky and Georgia, all tied to various strategic land acquisitions. There were even transcripts of phone calls, subtly altered, but still hinting at coercion and bribery. My God, Kaylin, Ilera whispered, her face pale, her eyes blazing with a mixture of horror and righteous fury. This isn't just about Riverbend boats. This is a criminal enterprise. Voss is buying up entire regions, silencing anyone in his way. This is bigger than anything I've ever seen. We spent hours poring over the files. The scope of Voss's corruption was staggering. He wasn't just targeting small businesses. He was targeting entire communities, buying politicians, environmental regulators, zoning boards. Corvin Hayes reports detailed methods of intimidation, blackmail, and persuasion, carefully veiled but chillingly clear. My case, the loss of Riverbend boats, was just one small brick in a vast, corrupt wall. We can't take this to the Oak Haven police, Ilera said, leaning back, rubbing her temples. Or even the state attorney general. Voss has too many people in his pocket. He'd bury it, or worse, bury us. So, what do we do? I asked, my voice low, filled with an unshakable resolve. We can't just sit on this. No, she said, her eyes meeting mine, the old fire burning fiercely now. We go federal, or we go public. We need an investigative journalist, someone with a national platform, or the FBI, someone who can bypass the local corruption. The FBI, I decided, they'll have the resources to take on Voss Holdings, and the power to protect us. Ilera nodded. I know a contact, a former prosecutor I worked with who moved to the Nashville FBI field office. He's straight as an arrow. If anyone can help us, it's him. But we have to be careful. If Voss finds out we have this, he won't hesitate to silence us. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. I've been ready for years. Ilera made the call, explaining in careful coded language that she had sensitive information regarding a multi-state corruption case involving a prominent developer. She secured a meeting for us the following day at a neutral location in Nashville. We spent the rest of the day meticulously compiling a summary of the most damning evidence, creating a clear, concise narrative that would quickly convey the gravity of the situation. We encrypted all the digital files onto multiple secure drives. We made copies of the ledger and the check. We were preparing for war. As dusk settled over Knoxville, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. My life, once a quiet river, was now a roaring current, pulling me into unknown, dangerous waters. But I wasn't alone. Ilera, once a symbol of lost hope, was now my partner, her resolve mirroring my own. I drove back towards Oak Haven, the heavy weight of the evidence in my trunk, the even heavier weight of anticipation in my gut. The fight was coming. I could feel it. As I approached the outskirts of Oak Haven, the familiar landscape, the quiet hum of the country night, usually a comfort, now felt charged with an unseen menace. I turned down the narrow, unlit road that led to my rented room. The Grand Marquis's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the dense woods that lined the road. Suddenly, a blinding flash of high beams erupted from behind me, followed by the roar of a powerful engine. A black SUV, its grille massive and menacing, shot out from a hidden side road, swerving wildly, cutting me off. It wasn't just passing. It was blocking the road, forcing me to slam on my brakes, my old car skidding to a halt just inches from its bumper. Before I could react, two more vehicles, dark sedans, materialized from the shadows, boxing me in from front and rear. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. This wasn't a random incident. They knew, Voss knew, the doors of the black SUV and the sedan swung open simultaneously. 6 figures, dressed in black, moved with chilling precision, surrounding my car. They were professionals, and they were here for me. My hands clenched on the steering wheel, my old eyes darting from face to face in the dim light. They hadn't come to talk. They had come to silence me. And I had the evidence, the key to their empire, in my trunk. A heavy fist slammed against my driver's side window, making me jump. A voice, deep and devoid of emotion, cut through the night. Get out of the car, Vance. We just want to talk. But the cold glint of metal in one of their hands told a different story. Get out of the car, Vance. We just want to talk. But the cold glint of metal in one of their hands told a different story. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. But strangely, a cold calm settled over me. This was it, the moment I both dreaded and, in some twisted way, anticipated. Voss knew, Corvin Hayes knew. They weren't going to let me walk into that FBI office tomorrow. The man who spoke, a burly figure with a shaved head and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, gestured impatiently with his pistol. Now, old man, don't make this harder than it has to be. My mind raced. 6 of them, armed. I was alone in my old Grand Marquis on a deserted road, but this was my road. I knew every dip, every curve, every shadow, and they had underestimated me. They saw an old man, not a riverman who had navigated treacherous currents his entire life. What do you want? I rasped, feigning fear, buying time. My eyes scanned the interior of my car. The evidence was in the trunk, tucked into a false bottom I'd built years ago for fishing gear. It was secure, but not safe if they took the car. You know what we want. Another voice, slicker, colder, said from the passenger side of the SUV, which now completely blocked my path. The package, the one you acquired from Judge Blackwell's residence. They were watching me. They'd known about the break-in. Tavis, he must have found the pried open window. My movements, my escape, all meticulously tracked. The thought was a chilling realization of how deep their reach extended. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my voice shaking just enough to be believable. I felt a surge of defiant fury. They wouldn't break me. Not now. The burly man chuckled, a humorless sound. Don't play dumb, Vance. We know you met with a lawyer today. We know you're planning a little trip to Nashville tomorrow. That's not going to happen. He raised his pistol, pointing it directly at my head. Last chance. Give us the drive, the ledger, the check. And maybe, just maybe, you get to live out your last few miserable years. My gaze flickered to my rearview mirror. The black sedan behind me was too close. The other one in front, its occupants now fanning out, blocked any escape forward. But the Grand Marquis had one last trick. It was old, but I knew its quirks. And I knew the road. You think you can just take whatever you want? I snarled, the feigned fear gone, replaced by a raw, unadulterated hatred. You took my home, my business, my life. You think I'm just going to hand over the means to your destruction? A cold smile spread across the burly man's face. You don't have a choice, old man. He reached for my door handle. That was all the time I needed. I didn't waste another second. My foot slammed down on the accelerator, not forward, but backward. I knew there was a shallow ditch on the right side of the road, covered by overgrown honeysuckle, a spot where local teenagers often parked. It was narrow, barely wide enough for my car, but it was there, and it was hidden from the road behind me until it was too late. The Grand Marquis roared to life, tires spinning, throwing up gravel as I wrenched the steering wheel hard to right. The sedan behind me was caught completely by surprise. My rear bumper slammed into its front grille with a sickening crunch of metal and shattering glass. The impact threw me forward against my seatbelt, but I held the wheel tight. The sedan's occupants shouted in alarm, their car lurching backward. That gave me the precious inch I needed. The Grand Marquis, with a bone-jarring lurch, dropped into the ditch. It wasn't a clean escape. The old suspension screamed in protest, but I was off the road, hidden by the dense bushes. He was going into the woods. I heard someone yell, "Get him!" The SUV and the other sedan were still on the road, partially blocked by the damaged vehicle. They couldn't follow me into the thick undergrowth. My old Grand Marquis, battered but still moving, scraped and rattled his way through the honeysuckle, the branches whipping against the windows. I felt a sharp pain in my side as I bounced over a hidden log. I knew these woods. My father and I used to hunt here, fish the hidden creeks. There was an old logging trail, barely visible, that wound its way down to the river, a few miles upstream from Oakhaven. It was impassable for modern vehicles, but my old tank of a car, with its high clearance and powerful engine, just might make it. Behind me, I heard angry shouts, the crunch of footsteps, and then the muffled thwack of a bullet hitting the rear of my car. They were firing. I ducked lower, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The Grand Marquis bucked and swayed, groaning like an injured beast, but it kept going. The logging trail was overgrown, branches clawing at the paint, but it was a path. I steered by instinct, remembering the faint twists and turns, the ancient oak that marked a sharp left, the rocky outcrop that meant a steep descent. My old eyes, accustomed to reading the river, now read the darkened forest, searching for familiar landmarks. They wouldn't follow me this way. Not on foot, not in the dark, and their cars certainly couldn't. My pursuers were city men, men of concrete and glass, not of the Cumberland woods. After what felt like an eternity, the trees thinned. Ahead, I saw the glint of moonlight on water. The Cumberland. I'd made it. The Grand Marquis lurched one last time, breaking free of the woods, its front wheels sinking slightly into the soft riverbank mud. I cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by my ragged breathing and the distant calls of night birds. My body ached, my head throbbed, and a sharp pain radiated from my side. But I was alive, and the evidence was safe. I didn't stay. They would eventually figure out where I'd gone. I scrambled out of the car, my legs stiff and protesting. I grabbed my old fishing backpack from the back seat, a piece of sentimental camouflage, and made sure the hidden compartment in the trunk was undisturbed. It wasn't. The ledger, the check, the USB drive, all still there. I started walking, following the riverbank downstream towards Oakhaven. The moon was a silver disk above the water, illuminating my path. My pace was slow, painful, but determined. I had to get to Alara. It was almost dawn when I reached the outskirts of Oakhaven. I called Alara from a payphone at an abandoned gas station. My voice was hoarse, but steady. They found me, Alara, last night, but I got away. I have the evidence. I'm walking to Knoxville. I'll be there by noon. She didn't argue. She just said, "Kaylin, are you hurt? Did they?" "I'm fine," I lied, just a little bruised. "Don't worry. I'm coming." "All right, Kaylin, get here safely. I'll be waiting." Her voice was tight with worry, but also with that familiar steel. The walk was grueling. Every muscle screamed, every joint protested. My side throbbed rhythmically. I passed the remains of Riverbend boats, now a fenced-off construction site. The first foundations of Voss's resort rising like skeletal fingers against the morning sky. A fresh wave of rage, cold and potent, fueled my steps. They wouldn't build on my ruin. Not now. I made it to Knoxville just after noon, leaning heavily on the counter of Alara's office, my clothes torn, my face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Alara gasped when she saw me, her hand flying to her mouth. "Kaylin, you look like you've been through a war zone." She rushed around her desk, helping me into a chair. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," I repeated, my voice weaker this time. "Just need to get this to the FBI." I pulled the ledger, the check, and the USB drive from my backpack, laying them on her desk. This is what they tried to kill me for. Her eyes, wide with concern, quickly hardened as they fell on evidence. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "Let's go." She drove us to the FBI field office in Nashville. The agent she knew, a man named Agent Quentin Silas, was exactly as she described, a man of quiet intensity with clear, unyielding eyes. He listened patiently as Alara laid out our story, the ambush, the evidence, the entire sprawling conspiracy. I added my own details, the years of observation, the precise names, the dates. When Alara presented the USB drive, Agent Silas's demeanor shifted. He took it, studied it for a moment, then looked up, his gaze piercing. "You risked a lot, Mr. Vance. A very great deal." "I had nothing left to lose, Agent," I said, my voice raspy, "and too much to gain. Justice." He nodded, a flicker of something akin to respect in his eyes. "We'll need statements, depositions. But from what you've shown us, this is big. Very big." The FBI moved with the silent, overwhelming force of a coming storm. Within days, the first tremors hit. Sterling Voss, who had been untouchable for so long, suddenly found himself at the center of federal investigation. His accounts were frozen, his assets seized. The Cumberland Riviera project, already under construction, was slapped with a federal injunction, halting all work. The news broke like a tidal wave, first locally in Tennessee, then nationally. Developer Sterling Voss accused of widespread bribery, corruption. The headline screamed. Photos of the Apex Tower, once a symbol of his power, now appear alongside images of federal agents swarming its gleaming lobbies. Corvin Hayes, the shadow fixer, was picked up trying to flee the country through a private airfield in Georgia. The digital files from the USB drive, combined with the ledger and the cashier's check, provided an undeniable paper trail. His reports detailing obstacle mitigation and consulting fees for judges were not just proof of bribery. They were a chilling testament to his systematic intimidation and subversion of justice. He offered a plea deal, turning state's evidence on Voss to save himself from a longer sentence. And Judge Theron Blackwell, the pillar of the community. His downfall was spectacular, and for me, deeply satisfying. FBI agents, not the local sheriff, arrived at his stately Georgian home. He was arrested on his front lawn, a bewildered, aging man in a silk robe, his meticulously manicured hedges providing a stark contrast to the unfolding chaos. The local news footage showed him being led away in handcuffs, his silver hair disheveled, his face pale and slack with shock. The shame, the public humiliation, was 1,000 times worse than any prison cell for a man who prized his reputation above all else. His consulting fee check, now public evidence, became a symbol of his betrayal. The story of Riverbend boats, of my family's legacy, became the lead narrative in every news report, painting Voss as a predatory villain and Blackwell as a complicit enabler. Alara, now a national hero in legal circles, spoke eloquently on my behalf, detailing the systemic corruption that had nearly destroyed my life. I watched it all unfold from my rented room, the television a constant companion. The images a stark validation of my long, bitter fight. The anger hadn't completely faded, but was now laced with a grim satisfaction. They were falling, all of them. Sterling Voss's trial was a circus. With Hayes' testimony and the mountain of evidence, he had no escape. He was convicted on multiple counts of bribery, fraud, and racketeering. His vast empire, built on deceit and stolen dreams, collapsed. His fortune, estimated in the hundreds of millions, was largely seized to pay fines and restitution. He died in federal prison a few years later, a broken, disgraced man, his name synonymous with corruption. Judge Blackwell, stripped of his judicial robes and his pension, faced his own trial. His defense was weak, his betrayal undeniable. He was convicted and sentenced to a significant term in federal prison. The last I saw of him was a grainy newspaper photo, his eyes hollow, defeated, lost. His beautiful home was foreclosed, his antique map collection sold off to cover legal fees. He had nothing left, just like he had left me. The Cumberland Riviera project was permanently abandoned. The land where Riverbend boats once stood, scarred by construction, became a symbol, a battleground. The federal government, in a landmark decision, worked with local environmental groups and community leaders, including Alara, to restore the site. It was designated a public park, a natural preserve, a place for Oak Haven residents to connect with the river, free from corporate greed. A small, humble monument was erected, not to Voss's failed ambition, but to the enduring spirit of Oak Haven and to the memory of Riverbend boats. They offered me a role in the restoration, a consultancy, a way to rebuild, to teach new generations about the river, about honest craftsmanship. I accepted. It wasn't about getting my land back. Not truly. It was about restoring something far more precious. The idea of justice, of integrity, of a community standing up against powerful forces. My old Grand Marquis, a silent partner in my desperate journey, was finally retired. I didn't get my boat's yard back, not in the way it was, but I got something else. I saw the children, Oak Haven's children, playing on the riverfront where I once built dreams, their laughter echoing off the Cumberland's banks. It was a new legacy born from the ashes of the old, the fire that had burned within me, the cold, hard fury that had driven me, slowly began to recede. But it didn't disappear entirely. It left scars, an indelible mark on my soul. I was no longer the quiet, vulnerable Kalen Vance who had lost everything. I was the Kalen Vance who had fought back, who had stared into the heart of darkness and dragged it into the light. The man who had broken into a judge's home, risked his life, and brought down an empire. I often walk the restored riverfront now, feeling the gentle breeze, listening to the river's timeless song. The scent of cedar and varnish is long gone, replaced by the earthy smell of damp soil and wild-growing things. I am old now, older than I ever thought I would be, and the journey has taken its toll. My steps are slower, my memories sometimes blur, but the clarity of that purpose, that singular, relentless drive for retribution, remains etched in my mind. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wonder the old Kalen Vance, the one who built boats and believed in simple honesty, would recognize the man I become. I fulfilled my vow. Justice was served. But the cost was everything. And as I watch the river flow, I understand that some victories, no matter how righteous, leave a chilling echo in the heart, a stark reminder of the darkness you had to embrace to find the light. The end.